Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here at PopTech. I guess I'm the tech part of PopTech, so we'll delve into a little bit more detail about machines and humans. You know, I was actually very impressed with Robert Kapp's talk, and I thought ostensibly I'm going to talk to you about artificial intelligence and about the clash that I think is emerging as we use AI more and more in our lives. But as I was listening to Robert talk, I was thinking, you know, really beneath the surface, this is about optimism, it's about technology, it's about our future, and it's really about the amplification of human creativity. And, you know, I only have a short time with you, and I just hope that you think about that, because that's really where this is going and how I feel about it. So yeah, machines are quickly becoming an integral and pervasive part of human decision making. I mean, not only are they advising our drivers, policymakers, doctors, lawyers, teachers, it won't be long before they actually act as those roles in our society. And the big question that leaves us with is, do we understand what they're doing? Can they actually explain the advice that they're giving us rather than just giving us answers? Or are we headed to sort of this culture clash where we become dependent or reliant on machines, but we're cognitively disconnected? We don't really understand what the AI is doing as it's affecting more and more of our lives and culture. And this is what, you know, I'd like to kind of delve into a little bit. And I'm going to do that through three stories. One about economic predictions. I'm going to pick up a different segment from the Watson on Jeopardy, not one that's so biased toward humans, and then talk a little bit about today's medicine. So first of all, like, imagine this question, like, are we headed for a big recession, right? And you can imagine using what's referred to as statistical machine learning, or what is also commonly referred to, as you'll hear in the popular news, as deep learning. And it's very strongly associated with big data. We have volumes of data, we have massive compute power now, and we look at all these variables, could be hundreds, thousands, if not millions of different variables, and they're fed into this machine that you could think of as a big, powerful correlation machine. And we take, like, for example, GDP, debt, rates, and all this kind of stuff, and it figures out, like, looking at the past and how these variables lined up with different outcomes, like whether there was a recession or not, you get this prediction. And you might not really understand, like, the prediction at all. It's sort of a black box. It calculated this big mathematical equation that relates those input variables to those different outcomes. So this is actually a quote from Nate Silver's book, The Signal and the Noise. And here's an explanation, like, why they think a recession is going to happen. The most reliable forward-looking indicators are now collectively behaving as they did on the cusp of full-blown recessions. So this really doesn't tell you anything about how the economy really works. It just says, this stuff happened in the past, some weighted combination of those variables ended up leading to this result, and that might happen again. There's really no understanding of how the economics work, but this is so powerful now. And with massive amounts of data and with massive amounts of compute power, it's cheap and fast. But it lacks that understanding. Can it provide an explanation? Are you entitled to an explanation? Nonetheless, healthcare, imaging, it's fascinating what it could do with imaging, but lots of other areas in healthcare, including diagnostics and treatments, e-commerce, economics, robotics, talent, politics, on and on. Driverless cars, of course. On and on, this technology is doing really remarkable things for us. But humans seek kind of these causal explanations. Humans want to understand, you know, the why. So you could use computers a very different way. You can imagine humans studying a problem and interpreting and generalizing and trying to understand it, and then building a model in the computer. And this is more a causal model of a formalized understanding of how the thing, the domain, whatever it is, it could be economics, it could be healthcare, it could be whatever, actually works. And then you get a very different kind of prediction, a prediction that now is explicable in terms of how humans conceive of and conceptualize the world. So this is also from Nate Silver's book, drawing this contrast. So here we have a different answer for why a recession might occur. Consumers have extended too much credit to pay for homes that the housing bubble had made unaffordable. Many had stopped making their payments and there are likely to be substantial losses. The degree of leverage or debt in the system would compound the problem, paralyzing the financial industry. The shock could be large enough to trigger a severe recession. So this starts to reflect how we're thinking about the economy, what the gears are and how they turn and how one thing affects another and so forth. This rich understanding is really palpable and compelling for humans, but to get there is very slow right now. It requires highly skilled centralized labor to literally manually encode that evolving theory and maintain that theory in the computer. This is not an easy thing to do. So the statistical machine learning has really taken off and provided tremendous value in the area of artificial intelligence. Let's look at another story. This one is about Watson, so indeed a landmark in AI, but how much did it really understand and what do we think about understanding? So this is a question that, Jeopardy question actually, that Watson got right fairly easily. Lincoln blogs, Treasury Secretary Chase just submitted this to me for the 3rd time. Guess what, pal? This time I'm accepting it. Anybody? What's that? Resignation. Very good. So the interesting question is, like, how do you know that? Like, do you actually know the history? I imagine lots of people can guess the answer was resignation. And the way you can imagine you're doing this, which is very similar to the way computers can do this, is with what we call a language model. In other words, like a statistical distribution about how words happen to occur in large corpora. So the more data we have, the more we can see the patterns of how humans use words, and we can predict what the next word is. So hi, there. Right? That's what you expect the next word to be because of that distribution in your head. So in fact, when you interact with a chatbot, the context and the language models that it's produced guesses the next word. It doesn't necessarily understand anything. So the context, the way the language occurs, the way the words occur in that context, allow you to make these really intelligent guesses. So now when we took this, so now you think, well, do humans do that or do machines do that? Humans actually understand. Well, humans do both. Humans will also kind of have that statistical distribution in their head, and when they don't actually know the answer or the theory or the history, they'll take a guess. In fact, we showed this question to a bunch of sixth graders, and they used their context to figure out what comes next after submit. They got a very different answer. Right? So their language model was trained in a very different context and guessed a very different word or phrase, in this case, friend request. So understanding is very different than processing language or linguistic at a surface level with just using the statistics about how words occur. I want to tell you another story. This is a personal story about my dad. On his 70th birthday, he actually went into cardiac arrest. And the ambulance was late in getting there. Eventually, he got to the emergency room at a local hospital. It's obviously a very grave situation, full of emotion and distress. I was waiting in the waiting room with a lot of the friends and family that was there at the party. And eventually, a resident came out and said, you know, your dad is brain dead. And you know, you're going to have to sign a do not resuscitate. And so as I'm sitting there trying to sort of just manage my emotions, which is many years ago, and you could hear my emotions still, you know, raging on this, I dared to ask why. Why do you think he's brain dead? How do you know he's brain dead? And the answer was essentially, look, there are a lot of variables, you know, prior history, how long the ambulance took to get there, you know, whether his pupils were dilated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And statistically speaking, you know, there's an 88, whatever it is, % chance that he's brain dead. So please sign the do not resuscitate. And, you know, being the person I am, I sat there and I said, well, wait a second. I mean, that's statistical evidence. And what I need is deductive, logical evidence that that person sitting on that table right now, they're doing all heroic measures to try to keep him alive, thinking that he's brain dead. Heart's still beating. They're keeping it beating with defibrillators and that kind of thing. How do I actually know? I mean, how do I know my dad is? I understand your average statistic that you trained over lots of people. You have a few variables in there, maybe 100, I don't know. But why do you know deductively why he's brain dead? And the answer was, you need to speak to the chief cardiologist. And so the chief cardiologist came out, a very similar story. I said, look, I need to know. And they said, well, to keep him alive, if you refuse to sign the do not resuscitate, to keep him alive, I have a bunch of decisions that you're going to need to make. So I had to reason through every urgent treatment decision, from whether or not to move him to a different hospital, what drugs to give him, because the belief was, he's dead. So we're just wasting our time. So I would ask a ton of questions, and I made one decision after another. Long story short, about 18 to 20 hours later, my father was sitting up in bed, 0 brain damage. "How you doing, Dave? I understand you thought I was dead," he said to me. Right? So this is the culture clash in a nutshell. Right? Are we entitled to explanations for the decisions that the statistically trained AI is making for us? How do we engage as these really powerful capabilities play a bigger and bigger role in our lives and in our culture? So step back for a minute. Another common experience you may all have is this kid barraging you, pummeling you, with the barrage of why? Why, mommy? Why, daddy? Why? So you're trying to teach something, you tell something to your kid, but why? But why? But why? I think you should rejoice when your kids pummel you with these whys. Because I think what's going on is something very unique and something about establishing that shared understanding with the parent and with the teacher and with the culture and the society around. The child is not satisfied with just patterns of right and wrong answers on the surface. They're pushing the limits of their understanding. They know what they don't know. They're saying, you know what, it's just not complete yet. I don't have a coherent model. It's not connecting logically. So they're saying, why? I'm still missing something. Why? I'm still missing something. And I think that's a really tremendous inspiration for something that I'm really excited about, which I call natural learning. So our vision of the future of AI is, instead of machine learning, of course machines are involved, I call it natural learning because it's how humans learn. It's AI systems learning the way humans do, by exploring, collaborating with us, and discovering and understanding the reasons why. Now, this is a very hard thing to do. This is a very demanding task, because it's not just looking at the surface patterns in the data. It's getting at the underlying logic, the underlying cognition that resonates with how humans think. But when we train AI to work this way, it's going to feel a lot differently than the way we train AI today. It's going to feel more like teaching a child. So I created this company called Elemental Cognition, and the approach is to use the elemental components of human cognition as the foundation for all learning. And the form it takes is sort of very, very different. But just as a quick sanity check, if you don't sort of believe me that we're not there yet, because there's a lot of hype around AI today. Here's a question I asked, one of my favorite bots. Should I bet on a recession happening in the coming months, and why? The closest bank is at, sorry, what? Is that a yes? Are you telling me I should take my money out right now? Maybe I'll cause a recession. I don't know how to respond to that. Okay, so I think we're all on the same page. We're not quite there yet. How hard is it? So let's take a step back. This is like a simple first grade, story. This should be fairly simple to understand, but let's just take a moment and realize how hard this really is. So here, this is a short story, really simple. So I'm going to read it to you. John and Mary were running a race. John fell, he hurt his knee. Mary looked back. Mary wanted to win. If she kept running, she would win. Mary stopped, she ran back, she helped John up. You all got it, right? So now consider how you would know who was running the race. Well, that's sort of easy because I can just look at that phrase, running a race. I don't have to understand what it means. I could find it in the text, and I could look and see what are the proper nouns before that, or the nouns before that. It's John and Mary. Fabulous, genius. Did I understand something? No. Who wanted to win? Well, Mary wanted to win. It's right there in the text. Who hurt his knee? Well, he hurt his knee. Who's he? Well, I could do another trick there, which is I could just look backward in the text and find the next noun, next proper noun, and say, that's the he. So I could say, John hurt his knee. Do I understand anything? I understand nothing. Okay, I'm just processing the text. Now consider how you might know, did Mary win? You probably all have a pretty good instinct about whether Mary won or not. It doesn't say that anywhere in the text. But you have a model in your head. We have that shared understanding. You're imagining two kids. You're probably imagining them in the park. The weather's probably sunny. You know exactly what's going on here. Was Mary nice? Doesn't say anywhere in the text. Can't look that up on Wikipedia. How old are John and Mary? I bet you could even take a good guess at that, because if John and Mary were adults,
Mary wouldn't have gone back. She would have wanted to win. Because she would have been taking the race more seriously. So context, language, culture, and reasoning are the keys to understanding. So when I think about the future, I think about, like, how do we get to that point where machines can actually become thought partners? They can engage and collaborate with us and ultimately sort of amplify our creative potential. And frankly, like, we're down here. We're at the bottom of this thing, where we're just starting to figure out how to get the computer to understand the basic elements of language, logic, and cognition. And then teaching them how to read, how to basically read. I don't mean tell you, pronounce the words. I mean understand the meaning of the words and the phrases and how they relate to one another. And if we can get there, we can get to a point where machines can actually, instead of learning to read, can read to learn. Then we get a big boost. Machines reach a threshold understanding of that content. We can get to a point where they can collaborate with us, interactively and fluently problem solve with us, and become thought partners with us. So we started creating a system that is designed very differently. Here's an actual story that, this is an actual dialogue, a real example from the system that we have. And it's reading the story about soccer. And it's sort of like the kid, it's confused. It's like saying, I'm reading this, but I'm not making the connections yet. And got stuck on the sentence, it's about soccer. Forwards try to kick the ball into the other team's goal. Now, what's obvious to you is that, well, of course they kick the ball into the other team's goal because that's how you win. That's how you get points, and that's how you win. But the system doesn't understand that yet, and it can't make the connections. It can't build that coherent model that it's confident in. So it actually says, can you explain why this is the case? The forwards want the ball inside the goal because why? And the user says, if the ball's inside the goal, then the team scores points. Okay. But now it still can't understand completely because it doesn't understand what the points really do. I don't understand. Can you explain? The forwards want the team to have points because the team with the most points wins. Okay. So now I'm making the connections. In a team sport like soccer, a player wants their team to win the game. Forwards are players who want to kick the ball inside of their team's goal to score points in order to win. Okay, let's move on. So this is the computer acquiring understanding through reading as it's collaborating with the human to sort of build that mutual understanding. This is a very different way of thinking about how to train machines. Story by story, we're priming the machine's independent capability. And the key is independent capability to learn by reading based on this underlying elements of human cognition. But what is the implication of this? I mean, it's enormous, right? Can you imagine a computer engaging with questions like these? I have a new idea for applying stem cells to organ regeneration. Can we discuss the possibilities? I mean, this changes everything, right? This unlocks our creative potential. How might the economy be affected by a dramatic reduction in the human labor force required for transportation of people and goods, which is happening to us today? Can we discuss that? Can you study and prepare, and can we have a conversation? Can we go back and forth on that? I don't know what the answer is. I don't want an answer. I want the ability to discuss, understand, and explore. What plays have you read that might act as metaphors for helping us better understand today's race relations? Can we explain the connection? Okay, cheated on that one. I put that one right in before the talk. So, can you imagine? Yes, I can help with that. This is a demanding vision for artificial intelligence, for machine intelligence in our future. But I think it's the one that we have to strive for, and the one that can make really the most difference to our lives and culture going forward. Thank you.